This screen is the basic Adobe user interface. This one is for PremPro CS3, but earlier versions have basically the same layout. At the top left is the scene bin. Here you create folders into which you place all the clips you might want to have in your video. Along the bottom is the timeline, where you place clips that you are actually going to use. Above it are two monitor screens. The one on the left is used to show the source clip on which you are working. The one on the right shows the clip on the timeline over which you've placed the cursor. Bottom left are the effects palettes for both audio and video. Things like dissolves and transitions you can apply to the clips in the timeline. To work with a still image, you first import it into a folder in the scene bin. The one I'm using here is a scanned image of a map. You can see what it looks like when I drag the clip across to the source monitor window. To work with the clip, you need to drag it to the timeline and place the cursor over it. The map then shows up in the timeline monitor window. Notice the difference between the two monitor views. The source monitor shows the image at its full size. The timeline monitor shows the central part of that image as it would appear on a video screen. To work with the image, you first select it by clicking on the clip in the timeline. Then you click on this tab labelled Effect Controls. There are three options here: time remapping, opacity and motion. Time remapping lets you use effects like slow motion. Opacity lets you adjust the transparency of a clip. We won't be using those. The effects we want to use come under the heading of motion effects. There are several options here, but the main three are position effects, scale effects and rotation effects. For interest, we'll have a brief look at the rotation effect first. By clicking and dragging on this clock hand, you can rotate the clip either anti-clockwise or clockwise. The main controls we need to work with are position and scale. We'll start with scale. The view in the timeline monitor shows only the centre, small screen-sized portion of the map. This is given the value of 100%, and you drag the mouse pointer to change this value. To zoom out, we reduce the number. To zoom in, we increase the number. The position control has two numbers. The left-hand number controls horizontal movement, left and right. The right-hand number controls vertical movement, up and down. These are the basic controls. In the demonstration you've just seen, the scale and position effects are being applied to the whole of the clip. So you can use them, as shown here, to frame and position any clip on the timeline. What we want to look at is applying these effect controls to animate a clip, and for this we need to use keyframes. A keyframe is simply a marker on the timeline that tells the software When you get to this point, do this. To see how Adobe Premiere uses keyframes, we need to look once again at the Effect Controls panel. This is the Effect Control panel, and the right-hand section is where we apply keyframes. The red line here is the same cursor as on the timeline. If we move the cursor over the clip on the timeline, we can also see it move in the Effects Control panel. The first thing to do is move the cursor to the start of the clip. The map clip is still at 100%, and I want to zoom out to a better position. Clicking on this little icon adds a keyframe to the timeline as shown by this diamond marker. Then we can zoom out first to see the whole of the map. Now we can zoom in again to the selection we want. I want it at about 50%. That's about the right scale, but now we've lost the title, Mevan Lake. To sort this, we add a position keyframe and then adjust the map upwards to show the title. Now the title is in the frame, but too far to the right. So we adjust the horizontal position to move it to the left. These keyframes have set the map as we want it at the start of the clip. In the film, I want to talk first about the lake itself and then move on to a nearby site called Dimmuborger. So I want the clip to finish near Dimmuborger. I start by moving the cursor near to, but not quite at the end of the clip. I always leave a bit of room at the end of the clip so that the image stays steady for a second or so, to allow for a smooth transition into the next clip. Then I add a keyframe for the scale at this point and adjust the value accordingly. I would prefer Dimmuborger to be a bit to the right, so I add a position keyframe and adjust the horizontal position accordingly. Now that we have applied the scale and position effects, the clip must be rendered. The red line above it shows that the clip has not yet been rendered. To do this, we choose Sequence from the main menu, then Render Work Area. The clip is rendered and the red line changes to green. And that's the job finished. To see how the effect looks, we just play it. Notice that the motion is very smooth and there is absolutely no sign of pixelation.